Hello and welcome back to another episode of Ruining Your Childhood.
Welcome back to another episode of Ruining Your Childhood, one sculpt at a time. Today we're going to be going to the comments and seeing who you would like me to sculpt. So today we'll be sculpting Krumm. Now, since Krumm is essentially just a hefty scrote boy with tiny legs, we're going to need to give him a little bit of extra support. After cutting an appropriate length of armature wire and wrapping it in some tinfoil, we can start the enclaying process. So I'm going to be using some living doll clay. I normally stay away from colored clays just because they're a little bit more sticky and kind of soft and hard to work with sometimes. But I've seen a lot of people come up with some pretty good results with this clay, so we're going to give it a shot. After slapping on some thick layers of clay, we can go ahead and smooth it out using my fingers and the back end of a paintbrush. Really just trying to get rid of the big bumps and clumps just to make it a little bit more smooth. And then after I'm happy with how that looks, we can go ahead and start adding his details. For his nose, I'm going to go ahead and pinch off another dank nug of clay, slapping it onto the top of his body, then using my fingers to blend it all in. Then we could start on his mouth. Now Krumm's a pretty happy scrote boy, so we're going to go ahead and draw him a big smile using my X-Acto knife, cutting out the remaining bits of clay, then waffle stomping that in with the back of my knife. Once I'm happy with that, we can go ahead and start on those inner mouth details, starting with his uvula. I take a small ball stylus and then draw in, well, his uvula and throat before flipping it over using a little bit of a bigger end to draw in some more mouth ridges. Now most of this is going to be covered up with the tongue and teeth later on, but we'll know it's there. We'll know. After applying the tongue, we go ahead and blend that in using my ball stylus. Then I can take a really small ball stylus and tap. Just tap. Tapping away at that tongue, giving them little taste buds, little tasteries. What am I saying? I don't even know. And with the inner mouth details complete, we can go ahead and start on his big old lips. For those lips, I went ahead and rolled out a couple pieces of tapeworm that I wrapped around his mouth. Then I used my ball styluses to help blend that into the rest of the face. Once I get those lip worms into place, we could go ahead and add little chunks of clay to the outer sides of the mouth to help add some folds and wrinkles. And then blend those little chunks of clay into the sides of the face just to help blend it all in together. Now the name of the game for this guy is texture, so we're going to be adding a lot. I take the side of my sculpting tool going over his lips, going back and forth, just making little cracks and ridges just to make the lips pop a little bit more. Now that I'm happy with how the mouth is looking, we can go ahead and start adding his teeth. I went ahead and pre-baked some teeth off camera using some translucent clay. I've talked about using this clay before in my previous videos, but I really like the way it looks when you bake it. It gives it a really nice authentic tooth look. After lining his mouth with these pearly whites, we could go ahead and start adding some more texture. For the skin texture, I'm going to be using one of these texture rollers that I made quite a while back, but I made these out of milliput and I just stuck it on the end of a popsicle stick. It does a pretty nice job of giving a little bumpy texture all over. I noticed that I was leaving way too many fingerprints behind, so I went ahead and threw on some gloves, and then I continued the texturing process. Felt like his face was looking a little too flat, so we're going to go ahead and take a piece of clay, put it underneath his lips just to build out a chin, and take that same texture tool, roll that over top, and then I take my ball stylus, adding little wrinkles underneath his mouth. And once I was happy with that, we could go ahead and flip him around back to add that crack, because we know Krumm be cheeked up. More on that later, but first we have to finish up those back details, adding a little spinal cord and some rib texture. And with that, we could go ahead and stick Krumm in the oven for his first bake. Now that our little scrote boy is all back from the oven and baked, we could go ahead and start on his arms. Went ahead and drilled 2 little holes on top that I'm going to insert some armature wire into, and then bend the top of those wires back to help support the hands. I then add some liquid Sculpey to the wires to help hold on the clay. Now since Krumm has some pretty chunky arms, we're going to just go ahead and pinch on some fat loaves of clay. Just add pieces on here and there just to build up the bulk of it. Once I got his arms to my desired thickness, I went ahead and took my sculpting tool, rolling it along the surface to help get rid of some of those details and blend it into the rest of the body. As for Krumm's hands, I went ahead and just pinched off a couple pieces of clay, sticking them onto the end of his arm nubs, folding those into a mitten shape. Now that I'm happy with the basic shape of his arms and hands, we could start introducing some of the same textures that we had for the rest of the body using different ball styluses and texture tools. Once I was happy with the details on the arms, we could start cutting out those fingers. I cut out the thumbs and I decided I was going to actually add some of the hand details before actually slicing into the fingers. I just felt like this was going to be a little bit easier adding these instead of having to do individual fingers. Once I was happy with how the hands looked, we could go ahead and start cutting out his meaty paws. Got those fat fingers looking juicy. I go back in and touch those fingers up and add some little back at the hand details before adding his eyeballs. For his eyeballs, I went ahead and just made these by pre-baking some translucent clay. I could have done gray clay, but I don't know, it was just a visual thing. I had some gray ones originally, but it was kind of throwing me off, so I just made these translucent clay ones, but we're gonna paint over them in the end, so it doesn't really matter. Now that his eyeballs are in place, his arms are mostly finished, and we could start on his feet. Kind of similar to how I made the hands, I just took pieces of clay, sticking it onto the bottom of the foot. I then go back in with some different tools to carve out toes and add some detail. And to finish it off, I go ahead and take that same texture tool, going over top of it just to blend it all in together. And with that, Krumm could go in the oven for its final bake. And with Krummy Boy back from the oven, we could go ahead and start painting him. Because I used a flesh tone clay, most of the work is already done, so we're going to be primarily just using a bunch of washes, which kind of felt like I was cheating a little bit, but I don't care about rules. For these washes, I just mixed up a bunch of different colors, starting with blue for the lips, and then a variety of different reds that I went around the face and arms with, just to let it sink into all the cracks. Then I hit that bad boy with a good old dry brushing. Just a dusting of a light flesh tone over the top of the surface. This makes the texture pop a little bit more, and then also sets the red back into the body a little bit. Gives it more depth. And just to add to the NAS factor, I went ahead and took some of that blue wash and drew some veins on. Once they dry, it really sets back and just looks like it's underneath the surface. As for Krumm's eyes, we're gonna go ahead and paint them with a light white wash. We're just gonna build up layers. I feel like this helps smooth it out a little bit so you don't have a clumpy white paint. After letting that dry, I went ahead with a very light red wash, going around the back parts of the eye to help build up some redness. I go ahead and repeat this process multiple times until I get the color that I'm looking for. Happy with how that came out, we could go ahead and finish it off by adding just a couple of black pupils using the end of my ball stylus. And what would Scrote Boy be without his armpit hair? I took a few clippings of hair off a wig that I had laying around for some reason, attaching that on with some fabric tack. Go ahead and cut it to my desired length. Then I spend the next few minutes just kind of playing around with it till I get a look that I'm going for. I do add some to the body, but I forgot to film it, so you just have to wait till the end. But until then, we could start working on that base. Put a little 3x3 piece of EVA foam that I then cover in some spackling. This stuff is called Fast and Final, and it dries in about 30 minutes, which is perfect for me because I have no patience. Once I get this bad boy covered and fully let it dry, we could go and start adding the paint. I kind of want it to look like he's in the sewer, so we're going to start with a dark gray, followed by a lighter gray dry brushing over the top. And once I let that fully dry, we're gonna go ahead and start adding some slime, which is made up by mixing some high gloss Mod Podge and some green paint. And with some last second surprise detailing and a little bit of assembly, we're on to those glamour shots. Thank you guys so much for watching the video. I hope you all enjoyed it. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and also leave a comment down below of who you would like to see me sculpt next. I'll see you next time.